What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are continuing our look into 2022, where we look at each team's schedule and then give you a projected record based off of that schedule. Texas A&M is up next. If you're a Texas A&M fan, please help us out. Subscribe to our Texas A&M channel as we try to grow some of these channels and get them up to 1,000 subscribers. Got a ways to go with Texas A&M, but your support would be greatly appreciated. So especially if you're a Texas A&M fan, please subscribe to that Texas A&M channel. But yeah, let's get into it here, looking at the schedule first. And before we get into 2022, let's look back at the 2021 schedule for Texas A&M. Texas A&M had a pretty favorable schedule in 21. A big reason why some people thought this team could be a dark horse playoff contender, a top 10 type team. When you look at their schedule and look at who they played in the non-conference: Kent State, Colorado, New Mexico, Prairie View A&M. So it had a very easy non-conference schedule, and they didn't have to play Georgia. They didn't have to play Florida, although Florida turned out to not be as good as we thought. But they got Missouri and South Carolina out of the East. They had Alabama at home. They had Auburn at home. So they had a very favorable schedule, and they were able to beat Alabama at home, but came up short in some of these other games. Ole Miss on the road, LSU on the road, lost to Arkansas. Haynes King going down early, of course, kind of messed their season up, I think. But still, the schedule was there for them. Looking ahead to 2022, is the schedule going to give them another opportunity to have a great year? Well, let's take a look at it. And you can see here, they open up with Sam Houston State. And actually, before we go into the game-by-game breakdown, let's look at who they play outside of the SEC West, because, of course, we know they're going to play every team out of the SEC West. So in the non-division games, in the non-conference games, they'll play Sam Houston, Appalachian State, Miami, and UMass. So that's interesting. You've got a pretty good App State team, a team that probably has no business beating Texas A&M, but they're no pushover. And then you have Miami, a team with a lot of question marks. How good are they going to be? I think it's a tougher non-conference schedule than last year, but still no huge marquee game unless Miami turns out to be a lot better than they were last season. And they have a much tougher draw out of the East. They'll play South Carolina on the road, and South Carolina is just going to be better next year, in my opinion, so that makes that game tougher. They play them every year, of course. And then they'll play Florida. Florida, a team with a lot of question marks. Don't really know how good they're going to be. But you would expect them to at least be in the top half of the East. So that's a tougher cross-division schedule than they had last season for sure. Now, let's go to the schedule. Again, they open up with Sam Houston State. They'll play App State on the 10th, Miami on the 17th. So those will be their first three games, three non-conference games to get things started. App State, I think, is a good game to kind of prepare them. Miami, a game that right now you'd expect Texas A&M to be the better team, but again, you never know what's going to happen. You never know which teams are going to surprise. Miami has talent, but playing at home, you really like A&M's chances in that game. Arkansas on September 24th, the game that kind of got it started last year for them to, their season kind of, well, I guess you could even go back to the Colorado game where they struggled, but their first loss to the season was against Arkansas, and that could happen again this year. Arkansas has a lot coming back. That is going to be a huge game. I think it'll be a top 15 matchup. So a huge one there to close out the month of September. They'll play Mississippi State on the road on October the 1st, and then they'll play Alabama on the road. Tough back-to-back road games there. They get a bye week, but then they go on the road to face South Carolina. So they don't play at home in the entire month of October, and really they go from September 17th all the way to October 20th. Well, they do have Ole Miss at the very end of October, but they have 4 games in a row where they play away from home. Neutral field against Arkansas, then on the road at Mississippi State, Alabama, and South Carolina. You don't usually see this. The SEC does not normally do this to where they're going to put back-to-back-to-back road games in there. Maybe they did it because there was a bye week. I don't know. It's interesting to see that. They do return home against Ole Miss on October 29th, like I said, and then Florida at home, so back-to-back home games there. And then on the road at Auburn on November 12th. And so I guess Arkansas is considered a home game for them this year. And that's the thing about playing neutral site games. It's a home game one year, it's an away game the next year. So when it is a home game for you, you're going to have only 3 real home games at your home stadium. And that's what's going to happen here for Texas A&M. So Auburn on the road, they have UMass on the 19th, and they close things out with LSU on November 26th. I know there's a lot of hype around Texas A&M because of their recruiting class, but this schedule is tough. This is a tough schedule. I mean, they don't have to play Georgia, but other than that, it really couldn't have been set up much worse for them in the SEC because you've got to play 2 quality teams out of the East. You've got 3 road games in a row. Arkansas is your home game this year, of course, but it's a neutral site game. It's just a tough schedule. Alabama on the road, very tough. Auburn's a tough place to play. They do get LSU at home. That's probably LSU and Florida at home, and Ole Miss. That's really the only good thing about this schedule. So much, much tougher for Texas A&M in 2022 than the schedule that they had in 2021. Here were the projections before the 2021 season. As you see here, Texas A&M going 8-4. Our projection was 9-3, doing what we're about to do in just a second for 2022. Our prediction was 10-2. I thought this team would go 10-2. FBI had them at 9.6 and 2.7, so 9-3, 10-2, somewhere in there. And then the over/under was 9.5. They finished a game and a half under that. Now, of course, the predictions, the projections, they didn't take into account Haynes King going down with an injury. Don't really know how good he was going to be last season. Of course, we just didn't get much of a sample size, so it's hard to say what would have happened with Texas A&M had he been healthy. And they had a lot of injuries in other areas as well, especially the secondary. But this was a team that was really hyped up going into last year. I did predict them to go 10-2, but I was actually on the lower end. A lot of people had them going 11-1, maybe going undefeated, and they showed that potential by beating Alabama. But at the same time, they showed that this was not a team that was on that elite level last season, even with the injuries. Even if they had not had the injuries, I don't believe this team would have been a playoff team, but they could have gotten to that 10-2 mark. But yeah, this was a team that was really hyped up. They're going to be hyped up again coming into this year with that great recruiting class. They put a few together now in a row, and so there is a lot of young talent on this team. But let's see what the projection would tell us. With this schedule, again, a very tough SEC West schedule. This is that schedule, and this is the scale that we'll be using. So your 50-50 games will be in white. If it's less than 20% or more than 80%, that means it's a guaranteed win or a guaranteed loss. If it's in the 20-29% range or the 71 to 80% range, that's a game where I think a team is going to be favored by about 10, double digits, 10 to 12, somewhere in that range. And then if it's in that 30 to 39 or 61 to 70%, that is a game where I think a team is only going to be favored by 6, 7, 8 points, about a touchdown. And that's kind of a way to look at this as we do these projections. Then we'll average it out. The green games will be counted as wins. The red will be counted as losses. There will be no red games for Texas A&M, but there will be 3 green games. Sam Houston, Appalachian State, and UMass. Texas A&M should have no trouble in these games. Now, App State is obviously closer to 80% than 100%, whereas Sam Houston and UMass are closer to 100%. But I think all 3 of these games would fit in this green category. So 3 wins, 3 pretty easy wins for Texas A&M. App State, I wouldn't say an easy win, not a guaranteed win, but Texas A&M should win that game. We go to the blue games now, and actually first we're going to go with the orange. So we have one game where they're going to be a decent underdog, and that's against Alabama, 20 to 29% range here. So that means I believe that Alabama will be about a 10-point favorite in this game. It's a revenge game for Alabama. It's on the road for Texas A&M. I know they beat them last season, but you look at everything that Alabama has coming back, they're going to be favored. It could be one that should be in the yellow once we get into the season and everything. We'll kind of obviously find out more about these teams, but looking at it right now, I think this is probably a game that belongs in the orange. So how about the games in the purple? 61 to 70%. That's the majority of the schedule for Texas A&M. So I think Texas A&M is going to be about a touchdown favorite, 6, 7, 8 points in most of their games. We're talking about Miami at home, Mississippi State on the road, South Carolina on the road, Ole Miss at home, Florida at home, Auburn on the road, and LSU at home. Now some of these, there's just so many unknowns. How good's Auburn going to be after their mess this offseason? LSU with a new coaching staff, a bunch of transfers. Ole Miss will have a new quarterback. Florida with a new head coach. South Carolina with some transfers that could make them really interesting. Mississippi State's one team that I think we do know a lot about, and this is a Mississippi State team that beat Texas A&M last season. So, again, a lot of unknowns here, but I think that just looking at it right now and where everyone is projecting Texas A&M to be, they're projected to be a top 10 team. I think they're probably going to be favored in these games, and Miami in there as well. Whereas I think Arkansas is more of a 50-50 game. I've seen Arkansas ranked pretty high in these early polls. I think that this is a team that is probably going to be a top 15 team. It's a team that beat Texas A&M last season. So I would probably, if we were really breaking down the percentages, I think I would probably favor Texas A&M in this game, looking at it right now. But it's close, and I think it's close enough to where this would be a 50-50 game, a game that would stay in the white. So when you average all this out, we count the green games as wins, and then we average the other games out. We use 50% for the Arkansas game, 25% for Alabama, 65% for these games in purple. And when you do that, it comes out to 9-3. So the projection for Texas A&M, 9-3 for 2022. This is the exact same projection that they had last season. It's a similar spot when you look at their early ranking, where we expect them to be. They're in a similar spot that they were last season, and it's a similar schedule. So that's kind of makes sense that their record would be 9-3, or at least a projected record would be 9-3. 9-3 was high for this team last year, even though it was lower than what most people predicted. So the projection was really more accurate than most people predicted last season. We'll find out if that holds true again this year, or if they can do better than this 9-3 projection, or maybe they do worse again. Maybe they finish 8-4 again. It's a team that has a lot of potential, but a lot of young pieces, and I think a 9-3 projection is pretty good. So if they do better than that, it's a good season. Worse than 9-3, it's a bad season. What are your thoughts? What do you think the projection should be for Texas A&M? 9-3, do you think that's accurate, or are you thinking higher or lower? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.